So I was on the phone recently with someone who I would probably consider to be the most outwardly successful deep game member in our history. And it's a player I've worked with for a very, very long time now, probably closing in on 10 years, actually, since he was 13 years old. And I'll explain in a moment how he was so successful. But first of all, I'll point out that he was actually making a critical mistake. And it's a mistake that he came by very honestly as a driven person. And I'm willing to bet that as a driven person yourself, you may be making this mistake as well. I know I definitely have many times in my life. So let's go over this quickly. First of all, this is a player who was not only very successful in basketball in high school, he was all-state, I believe, in Oregon. He was top 20 of all time in three-point shooting in Oregon history. Actually sent me like the newspaper clipping recently. And just a very, very good player, but decided that he didn't want to pursue basketball. Actually, he was being recruited by several Division I, Division II, Division III schools, and decided instead he was going to start a business. And so he started a business in high school. That business evolved several times, I believe. And now, today, he's running a company at 20 years old that has done over $2 million on their when was it? I guess it was in 2020. So over $2 million in annual revenue in 2020. He's 20 years old. So very successful at pretty much everything that he's ever done. And this player, when we were on the phone, he asked me a question that revealed that mistake that he was making. And so the question was something to the tune of, I work really, really well all morning. I'm getting a lot done. And then I have this lull in the afternoon. And is there anything that I can do to break out of that lull and re-energize myself so I can keep on going and keep on driving towards, the goals that he had? And this is something that a lot of us, he actually called it Mamba mode. He said he's like always in Mamba mode. And when that lull comes up, he kind of freaks out that he's falling out of what he calls, again, Mamba mode. And it was interesting to listen to because I used to think the exact same way. And I know many deep game members think the exact same way. Like we're always, always driving towards a goal. And my answer, actually, to the solution to this lull that he was facing in the afternoons kind of surprised him. And because I said, go with it, go with the lull, go with the lull. And personally, I also have experienced this exact same thing. So in my own work life, the afternoons, I always have a lull. And for many, many years, I tried to drive through the lull. I would just basically force myself to work. I'd have another cup of coffee and just grind through it. And every day it was like not that fun. I would kind of have this little hint of dread of the afternoons. I love the mornings. I love waking up really early and working. I always have. And then the afternoon comes and I'm just like very flat. And this is different for everybody. Some people work really well in the afternoon. Some people work well in the evenings and so on and so forth. It doesn't really matter what the specifics are, but the underlying concept that I want to drive home here is that nature is intelligent. Nature is very intelligent. And so when that lull came up for this player every afternoon, I did give him a solution that if he needs to, if he's under a time crunch and absolutely has to, yes, there are ways to like really pump yourself full of energy, and we can get into that in future talks. But more importantly, on a daily basis, on a consistent basis, much, much better to actually go with the lull. And so I gave this player a piece of advice that I've been following myself. And so for me, every day at noon, I stop working. I usually get up quite early. And so, this morning, actually, I was up at 3:55. Interestingly enough, I woke up without an alarm. And so I just got up and started working and got some really good work done. It's at the time of filming this, I think it's 6 a.m. or something, closing in on 6 a.m. So anyhow, every day at noon, I take a 3-hour lunch. And players find this hard to believe, but I take a 3-hour lunch. And during that lunch, I'm not saying that I'm like for 3 hours sitting down in front of a meal and just eating nonstop for 3 hours. No, during this lunch break, for the first hour, I exercise. That could be any number of things, really. Right now, I'm doing a lot of body weight work, but I exercise for about an hour in that first hour. The second hour, I typically am making my lunch and eating. Usually I'll watch like a really light sitcom TV show as I eat. I used to try to force myself to read during lunch, but I found that my mind has been so active throughout the whole day. The last thing that I want is more information coming in. And so I just sit down and like I've been watching Big Bang Theory. So I'll watch like a 20-minute episode of Big Bang Theory, eat my lunch, and then I'll take a nap. And I usually nap for about 20 minutes. And during that nap, I like lie down, essentially meditate myself into a state of like where I'm just lightly asleep, and then I just naturally come out of it. I don't use an alarm. I always wake up somehow. I guess I've just gotten used to it over the years, and I'll nap and then just simply wake up without an alarm very naturally after about 20 minutes. And then after that, I go for a walk. And so that 3-hour lunch has been one of the most enjoyable and one of the most revitalizing parts of my day. And I look forward to it every single day. It's like I'm really pushing through work in the morning and getting a lot done. But then when the time comes, that 3-hour lunch is like such a welcome, it's like a mini vacation in my life. Once I'm back from the walk, I go back to work, and I might work for an hour, 2 hours. But again, the afternoon is not my best time to be working. And so I typically just kind of wrap up and tie up everything that was going on in the morning. And sometimes I don't work at all, actually. And so after that, I'll do a practice, I eat dinner, and then go to sleep quite early. Usually I'm in bed by maybe 8:30 or 9. So the point of all of this, and your approach may be different than mine. It very likely is different than mine. But the underlying concept that I want to drive home here is that following your natural rhythm is a much, much better approach than forcing yourself to be in quote unquote Mamba mode all the time. And there's a framework, it's very simplified, but it's accurate for looking at this. And the framework that I'll give you is kind of as though there's 3 levels to what we'll call productivity or Mamba mode or whatever. The first level is essentially laziness. It's like you're just not doing what you need to do. And so to graduate from laziness is to go to the second level is discipline, okay? And you can't jump from level number 1, which is laziness, all the way up to level number 3, which we'll get into in a moment. You have to take this intermediate step. So the first step being laziness, you're just not doing it. Step number 2 is discipline, where you just force yourself to be on and follow like the plan exactly. You just do it, okay? There is a level beyond that though. And this is kind of the level that I invited this player or former player to graduate to, which I would call, for lack of a better term, flow. And flow is where you actually let nature take its course, and you're not necessarily following this exactly regimented, disciplined schedule all the time. No matter how you feel, no matter what happens, you're going to follow the schedule and put your reps in and do your workouts and do this and that. And at this level of flow, actually, you simply listen to the internal cues that your body is giving you. And so I'll give you, the clear example of that would be like the 3-hour lunch during the day. I was just not nearly as productive in the afternoon. I didn't enjoy working. It was much, much more tiring for me to work in the afternoon. And so I implemented this 3-hour lunch. And that is an example of just following nature's cues. I guess the last 6 months or so, I've completely stopped using an alarm clock. Actually, I have not used an alarm in 6 months. And it is beautiful. Like some days I wake up at 6, some days like this morning I wake up before 4 a.m. And some days, on the weekends, I might even sleep until like 7, which is actually really late for me. And the point is, I'm completely allowing my body to dictate, and the body and nature being inseparable. Our body is a part of nature. And so all of these natural processes that are happening, if you really examine it, your body is doing almost everything that it's doing without you exerting control over it. Your lungs are breathing, your heart is pumping blood, your metabolism is metabolizing, your stomach is digesting. Like all of these processes are happening without you needing to exert your will on them. You don't have to actually control them. They simply happen of themselves. And nature has been around a whole lot longer than we have, a whole lot longer. And we it's interesting that human beings in general have this tendency to think that we know better, right? That we can like tell nature what we want and that we can drive ourselves beyond nature. No, like we are an inseparable part of nature. We are nature itself. And so this level number 3, this level of flow, is actually allowing nature to dictate that. And it's kind of I want to say scary almost. Like it's a little bit unnerving to graduate from this strict level of discipline where we've been holding ourselves to like this program and schedule that we must do, because in many cases we're afraid to fall back into laziness. But if you can graduate to that stage of flow where you actually allow nature to dictate, and some days you got to work out on your schedule and you just don't feel like it, right? Literally, like your body is just saying no. To force yourself to train in those circumstances, veteran basketball players and trainers will tell you like that is going to put you further behind in most cases, right? And again, it's a fine line between falling back into laziness and saying, mentally, I don't feel like it, I'd rather play Xbox or something. That's not what I'm saying here. When your body comes online and says, no, I don't want to do this right now, it's to force it to do that is sort of like getting in a car when the engine won't start and revving that engine and continuing to just rev it. And we know that the engine's not going to start, but it will damage and strip the engine if you continue revving it. And so pushing yourself through these natural lulls, as this player was doing, I keep saying player, but this young man was doing, it's kind of like revving the engine of your nervous system over and over, and it can only do damage and it can only put you further behind. So I would invite you, if you're at the stage of discipline, again, well, I'll step back a moment. If you're at the stage of laziness, I invite you to like step up to the level of discipline and actually do the work that you need to do. You don't need to listen to these cues from your body because they're going to be very hard to understand. A lot of the time, the mind is going to override it and say, well, no, I'm just not feeling like it. When in reality, you do have the energy available to you. And so laziness is cured with discipline. Discipline in itself is just not just as big of a problem, but it is still a problem. And the cure for that is flow, what we're calling flow. So I would invite you to consider this. And it's something that is, like I said, it's kind of like you're going from certainty to uncertainty. It's like the sand starts shifting beneath your feet, and you say like, oh, wow, then like I'm not really in charge here. No, nature's in charge. And that's actually been the case all along, really. So the advice that I gave to this player is simply like, go with the lull. Find the pockets during the day when you're most productive to work, and find the pockets where you do have that natural lull. And my life has evolved to the point now where I look forward to the lull, honestly. And I like really, it's this sweet little break in the day. And even in the course of my weekly and monthly and yearly schedule, there's these natural cycles, these natural lulls, and listening to them has really made my life so much more effortless. Things get done in a much easier way. Things that didn't need to be done, but my mind was convincing me needed to be done, like the workouts that were just excessive and kind of revving the engine past that red zone. Those things have fallen away, and I've had more available energy to me, and life is just so much more natural and effortless. And so consider this really deeply. Where are you pushing yourself through lulls that nature intends to be breaks? Where are you pushing yourself here? And I understand that a 3-hour lunch, or waking up without an alarm clock, or taking naps without an alarm clock, these things are not available to everybody. I totally get that. But there are ways in which you can like release the controls a little bit and allow yourself to have these lulls and like pattern in to your days. The parts of your day that naturally have a lull, pattern in that lull, plan for it, enjoy it, okay? You don't need to be in Mamba mode all the time. So this is the advice that I gave to this young man. he has been, to my knowledge anyway, he's been doing much, much better with this. And my hope is that he continues graduating into that state of flow where nature works through him rather than him imposing his will on nature, because that never works, I hate to tell you. So nature's been around a lot longer than us. It's much, much smarter. It is like the greatest grandest organizational system that we know of. And quite honestly, the amount that we actually know about nature, it occurred to me this morning, that could be rounded to zero. Actually, we know so little about the universe in which we live that it could be rounded to zero. And so trying to say that you know better and like allowing our mind and our ego to override and say, no, like body, you must do this, not such a good plan. Okay. So I hope this helps you out. I know it's probably something that the disciplined, driven basketball player inside of you and person inside of you wants to resist, but I promise you there is a level beyond that discipline. And once you sink into that state of flow, everything becomes so much more easier, so much more effortless, and so much more natural. So I hope this helps you out, and I will see you in the next one. Hey, it's Coach Taylor. I hope you enjoyed today's talk. And if you did, the best thing to do right now, while it's fresh in your mind, is go to deepgame.com or click the link in the description, and it'll take you to our free Deep Game Masterclass, where you'll actually learn the entire deep game of basketball with all 8 laws and all of the fundamentals that you need to know as a high-level basketball player. We've had players call this the best hour of basketball learning of their lives, and it's completely free. So go to deepgame.com right now, or just click the link in the description, and I can't wait to see you there.